Hello, thank you so much for joining me. You are watching the Kim Iversen Show. Great to see you. Happy Monday. All right, it is a great Monday because over the weekend, Novak Djokovic won the Australian Open. This is absolutely amazing news. Novak Djokovic was deported, if you remember, last year from the Australian Open, from Australia. They actually wouldn't even let him compete. He is the world number one. He is arguably the best tennis player to have ever lived, actually. I know a lot of people think about Federer, they think about Nadal, but actually Novak Djokovic is, when you look at the stats, actually a better tennis player and has more wins than them. In fact, right now, after winning the Australian Open, he has 22 Grand Slam singles titles. That is tied with Nadal. Roger Federer has 20, Nadal has 22, now Djokovic has 22, Serena Williams has 23, and Margaret Court has 24. So he's just two away from being, really, if he wins two more plus a third, he'll be the player who's won the most titles of all time, the most open titles of all time. So look at this footage. We've got him breaking down after winning the Australian Open. Just an incredibly emotional time. This was just such a win for I'm just thrilled with this win. I was rooting for him. I stayed up all night to watch this match. It aired at 12:30 in the morning my time. I stayed up to watch this. Really, really rooting for Novak. I mean, this guy really stood up for medical freedom, stood up for bodily autonomy. In the crowd was Bill Gates, actually also watching this, while Novak, the unvaccinated player who wasn't allowed into the country, comes back a year later and wins. We've got him. If you remember, this is a year ago. What happened was he had received an exemption. So he had previously been infected with COVID, and he received the proper exemptions in order to get into the country. That was approved. But when he got there, because he was because he's an influencer, they said, because he has a lot of sway and people know him, the government argued in court. They admitted that he had the proper paperwork. They admitted that he had very little risk to the public health because he had been previously infected. Of course, now we know the vaccine doesn't stop the spread anyway, so which many of us knew that back then as well, but the Australian government was still being very tyrannical about it. They knew this, and they admitted in court he poses little health risk. They admitted in court he did everything properly and he received the proper exemption. However, they still deported him because they said that he basically was a boon to the anti-vax movement, that he was somebody that was going to be fueling the anti-vax flame. And so they ultimately rounded up the number one tennis player and would not allow him to compete in the Australian Open, which really, Nadal ended up winning that year. And I say you win with an asterisk. If the player is there to play and they end up being booted, then did you really win? And can you really be proud of your win? Can you really be happy about winning when you're not playing up against the best? Now, of course, in every tennis tournament, there's somebody who sits out. There's a lot of players that don't play. Some of the number, in the top five, you've got a couple that maybe don't make it to that tournament. But they don't make it not because maybe they sit out because they're injured or they've got something else going on. But they don't sit out because they've been discriminated by the country. And that's what happened to Novak. But this year, Australia did drop the vaccine mandate. Novak was able to get in. He was able to compete. And all of us were rooting for him. All of us that saw and were appalled by Australia's treatment last year rooted for him, wanting him to win as just really to win for all of us. And in fact, he knew it was for all of us. He knew that this was a big win. Here's his speech that he gave after winning.
I have to say that this has been one of the most challenging tournaments I've ever played in my life, considering the circumstances. Not playing last year, coming back this year, and I want to thank all the people that made me feel welcome, made me feel comfortable to be in Melbourne, to be in Australia. there's a reason why I've played my best tennis throughout my career in Australia and on this court in front of legendary Rod Laver. Thank you so much for being present tonight, sir. I try to pinch myself and really live through these moments, and it's a long journey. I know this is also a long talk from my side, but bear with me, guys. I just have to say this because only the team and the family knows what we've been through in the last 4 or 5 weeks, and this probably is the, I would say, biggest victory in my life, considering the circumstances.
So he goes on and, talks about the circumstances of being, of how he'd been treated and, just really, Novak has just been through so much. He has been discriminated against. He has stood up for medical freedom, and it is just really, really amazing to see him win. He also had a little bit of a snafu during this time in Australia where his father ended up taking photographs with Russians and saying something like "Long live Russians," and that ended up getting a bunch of pushback. And Novak in press conferences was having to answer for his father, and just people don't want to like the guy. People, they're going to find any reason to be against him, to be against what he stands for, to be against whatever his politics are. And look, in the end, it's just really fantastic that he won. Now, one thing is the reality of it with him being asked to even take these vaccines. Now, we have seen that people were absolutely rabid about forcing people to take the vaccine. They felt like people were selfish, or people were killing grandmas, or just anti-science or stupid. In fact, the other day, I was actually looking at a Twitter thread. A woman actually posted the question of give one word for anti-vaxxers. And I was amazed at how many people were answering this thread. I mean, here we are in January of 2023, and the responses to this thread were stupid, selfish, anti-science. Just going on and on and on. I mean, hundreds of people commenting in that way. I mean, still brainwashed into believing that the people that refused the vaccine, the people that stood up and said, we don't want these mandates, we don't want these vaccines, we don't think that they're right for younger people, are still being vilified by people today. It's really, really incredible. Yet, I do want to bring to your attention a couple of pieces of news. The UK just announced that they are ending the COVID-19 vaccination program for people under the age of 50. So they will not be offering any more to anyone under the age of 50. Starting in the next 2 weeks, they will stop vaccinating anyone under the age of 50. So you cannot get the primary doses, and you will not be able to get the boosters. So nothing in the UK if you're under the age of 50. Now, AP News says UK not banning COVID-19 vaccines for people under 50. They were saying that this is fake news. So they're not banning COVID-19 vaccines for people under 50. And of course, whenever AP does any fact checks, you have to then read the article because their headlines are very misleading when they do these fact checks. And in this one, when you read the article, they say, well, they're not banning COVID-19 vaccines for people under the age of 50. They're just not offering them to people under 50. What's the difference, AP? So yeah, they're not banning them, but they're not offering them. So the reality is if you want to get a vaccine and you're under the age of 50 in the UK, you will have to go and get a medical note from your doctor. You have to have special circumstances to where the doctor will write you a note saying that you can get a COVID vaccine if you're under the age of 50. And they say that that is pretty much going to be reserved for people who are in serious condition, immunocompromised in some way. Another country that has also ended their vaccination program for people under the age of 50 is Denmark. And there's been several others also in Scandinavia that have ended this vaccination program, and many others are talking about it. Now, the chatter around this, just so you know, when you go around on the internet or you're on Twitter or anything, people are going to say, well, It's not because of any sort of, and even AP kind of covers this in their article. It's not because of it's not effective or that there's any sort of concerns about medical problems. It's none of these things. It's just that there's not a lot of uptake for it. People are just not as interested in taking that bivalent booster that's out there. And that's true. The UK reported that the rate of uptake was down to like 0.1% of people under 50 were going out there to get their boosters. So people don't really want to do it. But that's not really why they're saying we're not giving this to anyone under the age of 50. I mean, compare this to, for example, the flu vaccine, right? I mean, the flu vaccine, you can go get that every year if you want, no matter your age. There's no restriction on the flu vaccine. No one's forcing you to take it, but also no one's telling you can't take it. If you show up to the Walgreens, they'll give it to you. So why won't they give you the COVID-19 vaccine? There's a big difference there. And that difference, there's probably a why. They're not really telling us that exact why. They're not giving the information as to why they've limited the vaccines for people under the age of 50, but you can guess. You can guess what that reason is. Considering you can get a flu vaccine, but you no longer can get this if you're under the age of 50. That's actually saying something. And if they're doing it for any other reason, for the reasons that many of us think why they're doing it, if they're doing it for those reasons, they're not telling us. And the reason they're not telling us is because they don't want to admit. They don't want to admit fault. They don't want to admit what they could potentially be very liable for. They don't want to make people very angry. And they don't want to feed the anti-vaxxers. The same way they had to get rid of Novak Djokovic from Australia, even though he followed the rules, even though they admitted he followed the rules and was no health risk. It was still, they didn't want to feed those anti-vaxxers. They didn't want to promote or prop up anti-vax sentiments. So of course now they won't tell us the truth as to why they're now limiting this in these countries, because they don't want to prove anti-vaxxers right. But it's saying something. You can get a flu shot, but you can't get this if you're under the age of 50. All right, I've got to tell you about the drink that I've been drinking every day. I really, truly enjoy it. People ask me in my private life, Kim, are you really drinking that Field of Greens? Are you really liking it? And you can ask my producer, Johnny. He sees me doing it. I drink it. I like it. Field of Greens is a wonderful drink. I like the lemon lime. It's a way for me to get all of my fruits and vegetables into my diet without having to eat a bunch of fruit and vegetables. And I've been doing intermittent fasting. So Field of Greens, I have to tell you, when I drink that, it really does curb the hunger. And I think it's because my body's getting all the nutrients. And it's saying, oh, we're fine. We're healthy. We're getting nutrients. And so we can survive those periods of intermittent fasting. Or if you're working out a lot and you're feeling, hungry afterwards, and sometimes, you work out and you just want to open up a bag of chips. I know we've all been there, right? But instead, if you drink a healthy green drink that is filled with all of those fruits and vegetables, then you will maybe not crave those chips, and maybe you'll actually reach your weight loss goals. So Field of Greens, I really do like it. I've been drinking it every day. It's been helping me in my goals. It is a wonderful way to get all of those fruits and vegetables into your diet. Go to fieldofgreens.com if you want to try it out. You can get 15% off your first order. Use the promo code KIM. That's fieldofgreens.com, promo code KIM for 15% off your first order. All right, guys, we are now going Rumble exclusive. We've got a lot coming up. Israel attacked Iran, basically brags about it. Are we headed for a war? Plus, Paul Manafort joins the show tonight to give us his side of the story of the Russian collusion witch hunt. And of course, Pfizer responds to accusations it's doing directed evolution or gain-of-function research, whatever you want to call it, in an attempt to make more money from more vaccines. That is all coming up exclusively on Rumble now.